The office was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of the expensive clock on the wall. She stood in front of his desk, hands trembling slightly, though she tried to steady them by gripping the file folder tighter. Her heart had been preparing for this moment for weeks, rehearsing words she had repeated in the mirror countless times. He was leaning back in his chair, sharp suit hugging his tall frame, eyes unreadable as always, the kind of gaze that could freeze a room. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice softer than she intended. He raised one eyebrow, uninterested, the way he always did when employees or board members approached him with things that didn't sound urgent. To him, feelings were irrelevant distractions. To her, they were everything. "I know I shouldn't," she whispered, gathering strength from the fact that she'd already started. "But I can't keep hiding it anymore. I care about you. More than I should." Her throat tightened, but the words kept coming. "I love you." For a moment, silence stretched between them like a taut wire, ready to snap. She searched his face for something, shock, warmth, even anger, but his expression didn't change. His lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw tightening slightly. Then he leaned forward, steepling his fingers on the desk. "You shouldn't have said that." His tone was flat, businesslike, as though she'd just violated company policy. Her chest squeezed painfully. "Why not? You must have known, the way I look at you, the way I—" He cut her off, his voice sharper now. "Because I can't love you. Not now, not ever." The words hit her harder than any slap could have. She felt heat burn her cheeks, her knees weakening. She wanted to ask why, to demand an explanation, but the cold finality in his eyes told her there was no room for negotiation. He had drawn a line, thick and unbreakable. Still, she couldn't stop herself. "You don't mean that," she said, her voice breaking. "I know you. I've seen the way you soften when no one's watching. You do care, even if you won't admit it." His gaze flickered, just for a second, as though her words pried at a door he had locked years ago. But then he shut it again, harder this time. He stood, towering over her. "This conversation is over. Go back to work." Her throat closed. She nodded quickly, blinking back tears, and turned on her heel before he could see her break. Outside the office, the world moved on, phones ringing, employees rushing, papers shuffling, as if nothing earth-shattering had just occurred. But for her, everything had changed. She had laid her heart bare, and he had crushed it with the weight of his fear. And for him, though he wouldn't admit it, a crack had appeared in the wall he'd built around his heart. He ignored it. He told himself it was for the best. But as the echo of her words lingered, the silence of his office suddenly felt colder than ever. The days that followed were heavier than she imagined they could be. Every morning, she walked into the glass building with her head held high, pretending his rejection hadn't shattered her inside. But it was there in every step, in every forced smile, in every moment she had to stand across from him and pretend she was just another employee. He didn't look at her any differently, at least not in ways she could catch. He gave orders in that same clipped tone, asked for files, expected coffee, and carried on as if she had never bared her soul to him. But she noticed the subtle changes. The way his gaze lingered when he thought she wasn't looking. The hesitation in his voice sometimes, as if he wanted to say more and swallowed it back. Yet none of that changed the fact that his words were still echoing in her head, cutting into her like glass. "I can't love you. Not now, not ever." At night, she sat in her small apartment surrounded by half-read books and cold cups of tea. She told herself she should move on, but her chest ached at the thought. How do you move on from someone who is still everywhere, your boss, your confidant, your silent protector in moments when no one else noticed? She remembered the times he had shielded her from boardroom cruelty, the way he once stayed late to help her finish a report, the rare moments when he almost smiled. Those fragments of humanity kept her holding on longer than she should have. But little by little, the truth was sinking in. Loving him was destroying her. One evening, after another long day of pretending, she stood in the middle of her apartment staring at her suitcase. She pulled it from the closet, its wheels scraping softly against the floor. Her hands hesitated at first, trembling as she placed the suitcase on the bed. It felt final, too final. But then she opened her drawers, started folding clothes, and with each shirt tucked neatly inside, a small piece of her resolve strengthened. She whispered to herself as if saying it aloud might make it easier, "I can't stay here anymore. Not like this." The next morning, she typed her resignation letter with fingers that shook less than she expected. The words were polite, professional, carefully stripped of any emotion, but the truth bled through between every line. She printed it, placed it in a neat envelope, and slipped it into her bag. That afternoon, she walked past his office. For the first time, she didn't stop to check if he needed anything. She didn't knock, didn't wait for his cold commands. Instead, she went straight to hour. By the time she left the department, a weight had lifted from her chest, though the ache remained. Back at her desk, she began quietly packing her personal things into a cardboard box. A photo frame, a mug, a couple of pens she liked. Her movements were steady, but her heart pounded, each item a reminder of the years she had given to him, to this place, to a dream that would never come true. And though she didn't know it, inside his office, the CEO sat frozen at his desk, staring at the door she had just passed through, wondering why her footsteps had sounded so final this time. The first morning without her was unbearable. He walked into his office expecting the usual rhythm, the faint knock at his door, the soft, "Good morning," she always offered, the quiet way she set down his coffee on the desk before disappearing to tackle her endless list of tasks. But the door never opened. The desk outside his office was empty, her chair pushed neatly in, the surface bare except for the computer that IT had already reclaimed. He told himself it didn't matter. Assistants came and went all the time. He could hire another within the week. But as the hours dragged on, he found himself staring at his inbox, waiting for her efficient summaries of the day's meetings. He opened files and realized they weren't organized the way she used to do them. The new temp stumbled, asking him questions she would have anticipated before he even thought to ask them. It was chaos, small, silent chaos that only she had ever prevented. By noon, he was restless. He pushed back from his desk and paced the room, his thoughts loud in the silence. He remembered the way she'd looked at him the day she confessed, her eyes bright but trembling, full of hope he'd crushed without hesitation. He had thought he was protecting himself, protecting her too, by keeping that wall between them. But now, with her gone, all he felt was hollow. That evening, he stayed late, though there was no reason to. He poured himself a drink and sat in the empty office, the city lights spilling in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He caught himself glancing at the door, almost expecting her to appear, chiding him for skipping dinner, reminding him of an early morning meeting. But of course, she didn't come. Days turned into a week, and the hollowness grew heavier. He found himself noticing things he never had before. The silence of his penthouse when he came home, the way his meals tasted like cardboard no matter how expensive the chef. Even victories at the company boardroom felt meaningless without her quiet smile in the background, the smile that always told him you did it. I knew you would. He tried to bury himself in work, but her absence followed him like a shadow. At night, when he finally gave in to sleep, he dreamed of her. The sound of her laughter in the break room. The warmth of her hand brushing his when she passed him a file. The raw pain in her eyes when he said he couldn't love her. He woke each time with his chest aching, the sheets tangled, sweat damp on his skin. One night, he found himself standing in his study, holding his phone, her number glowing on the screen. His thumb hovered over the call button, but pride and fear stopped him. What if she refused to answer? What if she hated him now? He set the phone down roughly and poured another drink, but the glass shook in his hand. It was then he realized something he had been denying all along. He hadn't rejected her because he couldn't love her, he had rejected her because he already did. And admitting that meant exposing himself to the same pain he had sworn never to endure again. But now, without her, the pain was already consuming him. The airport was crowded, voices blending into a restless hum as rolling suitcases clattered across the tiled floor. She stood near the departure gate, her suitcase by her side, fingers clenched tightly around the handle. Her heart pounded, not just from the weight of the decision but from the ache of everything she was leaving behind. This was it, the final step. Once she boarded, she would be free from him, free from the hollow ache of loving someone who could never return it. But as the announcement for boarding echoed across the hall, a sharp voice cut through the noise. Wait, she froze. That voice. She turned, and there he was, out of breath, suit jacket half-buttoned, tie askew. It was the first time she had ever seen him so undone, stripped of his usual control. He was pushing through the crowd, ignoring the stares, his eyes locked only on her. Her throat tightened. What are you doing here? She asked when he finally reached her, her voice barely steady. He didn't answer right away, chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. His gaze dropped to her suitcase, then back to her face. You're really leaving? I gave you my resignation. Did you think I was bluffing? She whispered, her words laced with both hurt and exhaustion. I didn't think you'd actually go, he admitted, his voice low, almost broken. For the first time, she saw something raw in his eyes, fear. I thought I could live without you. That it was safer this way. Her lips parted, trembling. Safer for who? For you, because rejecting me shattered me. You don't get to stand here now and act like you're the one in pain. He flinched, but instead of retreating, he stepped closer. His hand lifted, hesitated in the air, then finally cupped her cheek with trembling fingers. I was wrong, he whispered. I told myself I couldn't love you, but the truth is, I already did. I've been in love with you for longer than I can admit, and I was terrified. Terrified of losing control, terrified of being hurt again. But letting you walk away, his voice cracked, is worse than any pain I've ever known. Her breath caught, tears burning her eyes. She wanted to believe him, wanted to surrender to those words she had dreamed of hearing, but fear clawed at her. How do I know this isn't just guilt? Or loneliness? What if tomorrow you change your mind? I won't. His answer was firm, his eyes unwavering. Because I can't lose you again. You're not just someone who works for me, not just someone who cares. You're everything, and if I have to spend the rest of my life proving that to you, I will. The boarding announcement echoed again, pulling her back to reality. She looked at the gate, then at him, the man who had broken her heart, and yet the only one it still beat for. For a long, trembling moment, silence stood between them. Then she exhaled shakily and set her suitcase down. His shoulders sagged with relief, and before she could speak, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as though he'd finally found his way home. And for the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, love was worth the risk.